Good afternoon, financial professionals. My name is Jennifer Nadeau, case design specialist here at E4 Insurance Services, welcoming you to The Brew, building relationships every week. For those of you tuning in today for the first time to the Brewcast, welcome. We like to start the Brewcast by celebrating what today's national day is. And today is National North Carolina Day. It is also National Good Neighbor Day. And the next two are my absolute favorite, and I think they're great together. So it is National Women's Health and Fitness Day. And it is also National Drink Beer Day. So we were just kidding before. Everything in moderation, I guess. Maybe have a beer after you get on your treadmill. I don't know, but I love that they're together. So on today's brew, we welcome Melissa Finnegan, Vice President of Training and Development with Lincoln Financial Distributors, as she presents on the topic of breaking through the noise, the art of communication. Melissa will share with us how to ask for an introduction artfully, the importance of doing your homework before a meeting with an advisor or a client, words to use and lose, best practices for email, and also how to leave an effective voicemail. And Melissa is a personal friend and former colleague, and I know that we're in for a great treat today. Before we get started, please remember to use the chat box to share your thoughts and ask questions throughout our time together. And also, all attendees are in a drawing for a prize, and we will be announcing the winner as usual at the end. Thank you for tuning in. And Melissa, so happy to have you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Brew today.
Thanks, Jen. I'm very excited to be here and working with you again, especially. I'm excited about this content.
Me too. So you've titled the time together for this presentation, Breaking Through the Noise, and described it as I said in my intro, how advisors can learn how to ask for an introduction artfully, the importance of homework. I love the words to lose and use, writing emails. I thought it would be great if you could just give us a little history on how this was born, where all of this great content in this material was created from.
Sure. Well, this presentation was actually created quite a few years ago, and it was created originally for our wholesalers, which are my main customers at Lincoln Financial. And the feedback we were getting, especially at that time, was we do great content. We do communicating for results. We do presentation skills, how to ask the right questions, listening workshops. And they said, that is all fantastic information, but how are we getting in front of the right people to practice all those skills? And I took a step back and thought, wow, what a great observation. How do you break through the noise? Once you have a prospecting list, how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else that is prospecting that same person? And that's kind of how this presentation came to fruition.
Awesome. And yeah, I know, again, from personal experience that there's been some great wholesaler development courses that you teach and that you champion at Lincoln. And yeah, great information to put all together. So let's get into it. How about we start with the art of introduction? I know that you speak not only to how to get in front of people, but also how to get in front of the right people, and also how to differentiate ourselves as well.
Yeah, and the first thing, we'll talk about three things as you mentioned today. We're going to talk about the art of the introduction, and then we'll talk about the art of communication, and finally we'll land on the art of the elevated experience. And when I started to pull this presentation together, obviously the fastest way in front of the right people is to ask for the introduction. However, just because it's the fastest way doesn't mean it's the easiest way. And a lot of times there is an art to asking for the introduction. And so we'll start there. And I love this quote: you'll never lose business by asking for an introduction, but you never know how much business you'll lose by not asking at all. And I completely agree with that. And a lot of times we're not asking for the introductions, and we'll get into that in a second. But when we talk about, how do you do it? What are the principles behind it? The first thing you want to think about for yourself is the why. Why should I or anyone else make that introduction for you? What is your reason that you do what you do, and what is the value that you bring? And in my experience working with top wholesalers, top financial professionals, the most successful ones are driven by why they do what they do. There's a reason they're in this business. And generally, it's a personal reason. There's some story about a family member, a long-term care event, or a life insurance that they never bought, or some story that kind of drives why they do what they do. And they want to help folks retire and live with dignity and make sure that they can maintain that lifestyle in retirement. Make sure that you know what your why is. Spend some time thinking about that and being able to articulate that to someone else.
Mhm.
The second thing you really want to do is phrase it as a request for help. As human beings, we love to help other people that we've had great experiences with. It's the law of reciprocity. I hold the door for you. You're going to hold the door either for me if it's a double door, or for the next person in line. I bought this round of drinks. Maybe it's a beer since it's National Beer Day. Um, Maybe it's a cocktail. You buy the next round. I bought lunch. You're going to buy next time. We like to feel even. We don't like to feel like we owe anyone anything, but we especially like to give back, again, when we've had a really, really great experience. And we're going to talk a little bit more about, what is that? What does that look like?
Mhm.
The next thing is you got to make it easy for people to make the introduction. Offer to write a couple of notes down, or even script the email or voicemail for them if they're going to make a phone call or an email on your behalf. It should fit on a cocktail napkin. It doesn't need to be this lengthy, Bible on why you should work together. It could just be how long you've known the person that's making the introduction, what success story you can share to help kind of pique their interest, but really give them the words to say and make it easy. And
Mhm.
then lastly, one of my pet peeves is you have to thank and recap whoever made the connection for you. There's nothing worse than making an introduction and then never hearing another word about it. I want to know what happened. Did you meet? Obviously, you're not going to give any personal information about what you decided to do together. But even if it's thank you so much for the introduction, they weren't interested at this time, but I just appreciate you so much making that introduction for me and going to bat for the services that I can provide. And then give back. If there's a chance for, maybe they own a business and you can refer people to that business, or maybe they're a center of influence and you can send folks their way as well, make it a two-way street and not just give to me and I'm not going to give back to you. So
Mhm.
those are kind of the four main principles behind the science of the art of the introduction. And one of the things that we hear a lot, and one of the things I love about this presentation specifically, is we not only tell you the science behind things, but we're going to give you the exact words to say when asking for the introduction. And
Wonderful. Go
we
ahead.
call this the green light moment. So you'll notice on here it says 91.2. When we did the research, 91% of highly satisfied clients said that they are willing to give an introduction. Yet 2% of us ask.
Hmm.
91%. Now, the key word here is highly satisfied clients, not someone who's like, yeah, the service is okay. They are really satisfied with the work that you're doing with them. But yet we only ask 2% of the time. And we took a step further and said, okay, why? Why are we only asking 2% of the time? Any guesses on the number one reason?
Not knowing what to say or afraid to ask.
So those are actually number two and number three. The first reason is they forget. We just
Ah.
forget to ask for the introduction. That's
Mm.
the number one reason. Guilty of it myself when I was in sales. I would get baby gifts when I had my kids. I would get Christmas presents. I know people would have made an introduction had I asked. I just never remembered to ask. And then I started putting like a post-it note on my computer to try to remind myself as I'm, talking to folks to ask for that introduction. So number one reason is they forget. Number two is they don't want to seem pushy or salesy. And number three is they don't know when and they don't know what to say.
Mhm.
And so this is the part of the presentation that I would encourage people to grab a pen and a piece of paper, because I'm going to give you 5 steps on how exactly to ask for an introduction. When we talk about when, it is what we call the green light moment. And that's why we have the stoplight on here. And the green light moment is any time that someone says the words thank you, either for business that you've conducted together, or maybe just some sort of value add service that you provided to them. That is the green light moment for you to go ahead and ask for the introduction. So step number 1 is what we call the hot potato. They say thank you, you say thank you for the thank you. Number 2, can I ask for your help? Anytime someone's had a good experience and somebody says, can I ask for your help? What's your normal reaction?
Of course. Yes.
Of
How can
course,
I
of
help?
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can I do for you? Okay, so that's step number 2. Can I ask for your help? Step number 3 is, who else do you know that has a similar situation like yours, or that you work with or are on a board with, that I could do business with, that you could make an introduction for? Now, they may not have a name off the top of their head, because sometimes we just, deer in headlights, right? We freeze. That's okay. If they give you a name, then go on to step 4. Step 4 is, what should I know about them personally, professionally, and what are they passionate about? So the 3 Ps. If they say, oh, you have to talk to Jen. Okay, great. What should I know about Jen personally, professionally? What is she passionate about? How do they know them? Is it a family friend? Is it a working relationship? Are they on a board together? Do they belong to the same country club? And, some people will come back and say, well, I don't know what my friends make. I don't know. We don't really talk about their financial situation. And yes, that's true. I don't really have those conversations, but I know who has money and who doesn't in my friend group. I know who I would make a referral to and who I potentially would not refer.
Right.
So even just doing that gets them into that law of reciprocity space. I recently had someone do work at my house, and his name was Brian. We went to college together. He did beautiful work, him and his brother. He did my kitchen and my bathroom. Now, if Brian had, on the day he was finished, said to me, Melissa, do you have anybody who's looking for work done? Probably in that moment, I would not have been able to think of anyone. Maybe I would have. But because I had such a great experience working with Brian, the next time somebody says to me, hey, do you know anybody who could, help me with remodeling? Who's the first person that I'm going to think of?
Exactly. Yep.
It's Brian, because he asked me for the favor. I want to do the favor. I'm highly satisfied, and he's who I want to refer. So don't forget about this law of reciprocity. They may not be able to give you a name right away, but now you've planted the seed. So that's step number 4, which I know about them personally, professionally. What are they passionate about? And then the last step, step number 5, is be my advisor for a minute. If you were me, how would you approach Jen? What would that sound like? What would that look like? And are you willing to make some sort of introduction for me? So maybe it's, I can use your name. Maybe it's, they'll leave a voicemail on my behalf. Maybe they'll send an email on my behalf. Maybe they'll do a personal introduction and we'll go to lunch, or we'll play golf, or whatever it might be. Ask them what type of introduction they're willing to do. And those are the 5 steps. So thank you for the thank you. Step number 1. Step number 2, can I ask for your help? Step number 3, who else that has a situation like yours, is in a similar position, or you feel like I could work with, that, and get a name.
Right.
If you get the name, it's the 3 Ps. Step number 4, which I know about them personally, professionally, what are they passionate about? And then lastly, step number 5 is be my advisor for a minute. How would you approach XYZ person? And are you willing to make an introduction, or would you be willing to make an introduction? So those are kind of the 5 steps and the idea around the art of the introduction.
Okay. And that's excellent. it's a common theme of research, more of know your customer, get to know your customer that you're trying to get to know, right? And just
Yeah.
remembering simply to ask. We're talking a lot about referrals, right? What if we don't have the benefit of a referral when we're meeting new people? How do we differentiate ourselves or get that immediate, and I've used it before, but that immediate street cred, right? When we
Right.
don't
Yeah.
have that introduction.
Yeah, well, and that's a great question because a lot of times, if we're just beginning in this business, we may not have those connections yet. We don't have the opportunity to ask for an introduction, or there might be a list of prospects that we have received that, again, we don't have any connection with those. And the number one thing that I would say that you are going to need to do is your research. You are going to have to spend some time researching the folks on that list so that you can differentiate yourself from everyone else. You need to go on social media, you need to go on LinkedIn. You can use Google searches, and there's something called a Boolean search to help kind of narrow down that field. It's a logic that's built into any search engine, so whether it's LinkedIn or Google. And I'll give you a great example. We had someone coming in to talk to us. His name was Colin Lake. He lived in Michigan. And I wanted to research him, but when I put in Colin Lake, Michigan, it kept coming up with this musician, and that was not who I was trying to research. So I was able to put Colin Lake in quotes. So you put the name in quotes, and then you can use plus and minus or and or. And I put minus musician plus Michigan. And it removed all the information about the musician and just left the Colin Lake that I was trying to find. If you have someone who has a very common name, or you're really struggling to find research, or it's overwhelming, you can kind of narrow it down. So I do searches around like, are they on any boards? What donations do they make? Have any sales articles been written or published by them? Anything that I can find to make a connection. And the research shows that even when someone knows you're doing it, like your name's Jen, my name's Jen, you went to Penn State, I went to Penn State, whatever it is that you're trying to connect with, it still leaves them with a good vibe about you and the company that you work for, as long as it's authentic.
Right.
That connection is authentic. So number one thing, and again, I'm not recommending that you do this for every single person that you're prospecting, but those top prospects, the ones that can change your book of business and raise your AUM, you want to spend time doing your research. And you'd be amazed at how much information you can find out, especially around successful people, because they usually have a pretty big social presence. And that's one of the reasons why they're successful. So do your homework. And then once you've done your homework, generally the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick up the phone to call them. Well, the bad news is that 80% of 80% of calls go to voicemail now. I'm sure you're all familiar with getting a bunch of spam calls. And a lot of times they go directly to voicemail because you can set the settings on your phone. So it's harder and harder to get people on the phone. And you may say, well, is it even worth making a phone call and leaving a voicemail? And the answer is yes, because what you lack in quantity, you make up for in quality.
Okay.
But there are some rules around leaving a great voicemail. Now, this number one bullet is a little controversial because everyone has been trained the same way. Hi, this is Melissa Finnegan with Lincoln Financial. The problem with that is that if I don't know your name and I don't know your company, chances are I'm probably deleting the voicemail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a lot of articles out there that say you should lead with your name and your phone number. This is completely personal and up to you. Obviously, if you already know the person, you can leave your name and phone number, because that is a question that I get sometimes. But if if you're testing it out, maybe do a couple voicemails doing it this way and a couple voicemails doing it the other way, and see which one gets more responses. This is just a tip, but feel free to do it however you want. It's very uncomfortable to not start with your name. And we recommend something like, hi, Jen, the reason for my call today is two things I want to point out to you. Two things of value, just to get them to call you back. You are not trying to sell anything. That's why it says up here 20 to 30 seconds. You can't sell anything in 20 to 30 seconds. You're not trying. You're just trying to get them to call you back. Do not reference any failed attempts. This is the green light moment we don't want anyone to have, right? Oh, this is Melissa again with Lincoln Financial. I've tried you a few times. Oh, you tried me a few times and I didn't answer. Well, now my green light moment to delete you again. Because if I didn't listen to you the first couple of times, I'm probably not going to listen to you the second couple of times. Every time you call someone, you should have a valid reason for calling them and giving them some sort of value within the voicemail or the email. Best times, no surprise here, 6:45 to 9. Now, that being said, I am not follow your cold call rules. This would only be if you have maybe an established relationship with someone and you're leaving them a voicemail. Maybe you know they get up at the crack of dawn to exercise, so they're in the office by 6:45. Fine, but otherwise follow any cold calling rules. And again, no surprise that, Friday afternoons and Monday mornings are probably the worst time to try to get in touch with folks. The last bullet here is you have to practice this. Practice your timing for 20 to 30 seconds, and we're going to share some scripts with you where we've kind of timed them out already. And you have to make sure that you listen to yourself. So call yourself, leave yourself a voicemail, and then ask yourself the question, would I call me back?
One of the things that I'm thinking about, Melissa, as you're talking through this, and I've seen this before, and the whole don't start with your name thing. You're right. It just feels so unnatural, but I get it. Why would you start a message with something that's not familiar to them anyway? You would want to start with, well, why is this person calling me? But with that point, I think it's also really important to keep in mind that, yes, maybe this is my first voicemail to a new client. And yes, my end game or my end goal is to have them be my client and to help them with something, help them with their financial needs. But really, what is my objective for this one call is to have them call me back, right? So it's breaking it up in bite-sized chunks that, yeah, I know what my end goal is, but right now, I really just want them to return my call, right?
That's all you're trying to accomplish
Yeah.
on a voicemail. And even, once you send the voicemail, you want to follow through with an email. You want to give them two ways to respond back to you, either pick up the phone and call you, or they can respond to the email.
What's convenient for them, right?
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah. You want to make it easy. Like we said
Yeah.
before, you want to make it really easy for them to hit you back and make that connection. The
Right.
problem is that we are getting inundated with emails right now. This statistic says 120 a day. Like I said, we did this presentation a few years ago. I bet you that statistic it feels like it's up. I know on my email, 120, sometimes I can get that in an hour, let alone a day.
Yeah.
And we have a personal email, we have a work email. So we are very much, people are, vying for our attention. And so there are some tricks to how to craft a great email. The biggest thing I would say is your subject line. Right now, over 55% of open rates are based just on subject line alone. And there's a great free website called subjectline.com that can help you create your subject lines. And again, we're going to share some email templates with you with subject lines that score really well. But once you're kind of creating your own correspondence, this is constantly being updated. You just have to put in your name and email address. And there's a great newsletter that the owner of the site sends out probably once a month that has some great tips as well. And he will tell you what is resonating in the market, like what is getting people to click and open things. But it'll score you from 1 to 100, and it'll tell you how to make it stronger or what's maybe potentially keeping it. So highly, highly recommend subjectline.com as a resource when you're trying to create subject lines, because they are so important. Again, if I don't recognize the name and the subject line doesn't catch my attention, it's getting deleted. Right. And now it's worse than ever, because now, I don't know about you, but I have a focused inbox and an other inbox, and like all the spam goes to other, and same deal. Like I'm almost block deleting that stuff unless it catches my attention from a subject line standpoint. And at Lincoln now, it even tells you this is from an external source. So if I see this is from an external source and I don't recognize the name and the subject line, you're getting deleted. And so all of this, you have to think about that you're competing with a lot of other emails to get people to open it. So subject line is so important. You want to format it for mobile devices. Most people are opening on a mobile device. Send it to yourself, open it on your phone, see how it presents. There are some maximums in subject lines, so you want to make sure that it doesn't get cut off. And then you also want to send more than one email. The sweet spot is 5. Most people say no 4 times before they say yes, and most salespeople give up after the 4th no. You want to give it that one more shot. And one of the questions that I get a lot is, how often should I send emails? Once a week. I wouldn't do any more than once a week. You can tweak them a little bit, but feel free to underline, italicize, bold, highlight, change the font, anything you want to draw their eye to. Try to keep it to 100 words or less. I even recommend, if it's a first time reaching out, 50 words or less, but less is more, as you know. If anyone sends me an email that's like a Bible, I'm like, oh, either I'll file that and get back to it, which I never do, or it's getting deleted. So make sure you keep it short and sweet. And then if you can add a picture, a case study, an attachment, videos resonate really, really well right now. Anything like that to differentiate yours from everyone else's. And then don't give up on the power of a handwritten note. Think about the last time you got a handwritten anything in the mail, whether it was a letter, even the envelope just had handwriting on it. And you're like, whoa, it's not Christmas time. What is going on? Now, I don't know about you, but I either I get so excited, I open it right away. It's the first thing I open, or it's like dessert, right? I open all my bills and then I get to the handwritten letter and I want to see what's in it. If you can put something in the envelope to kind of make it a funky texture, that's going to pique curiosity even more. Again, this isn't for everybody. This is for those top prospects that you're going after. And you can see on the screen here that 70% of people say a handwritten note means more to them to tweet, a text, a Facebook message. So don't give up on the handwritten note. And if you have horrible handwriting, find somebody who has good handwriting, pay them a couple bucks to write your notes out for you if you're worried about it. But again, make sure that you don't forget about the handwritten note, because they are really, really important.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to call them tips, but they're more than that, I think. So I'm watching the time. We're at 1:26. We will definitely want to give some time for questions as well. And I know that you have some templates or some suggestions for voicemails and emails as well. So I definitely want to give you time for that. And also do not want to forget about our words to use and lose as well. So
yeah, so the scripts, you'll get the slides. I would just say practice. Like I always joke around, I'm from the Northeast. My 20 to 30 seconds isn't everybody else's 20 to 30 seconds. But here's some voicemail scripts, some email scripts. Like I mentioned, we even scored them on subjectline.com. Feel free to use them, tweak them so that they sound like something that would come from you. And then the last thing we're really going to focus on here is this art of the elevated experience. Now that you have them in front of you, how do you make them want to do business with you? First thing, you want to make sure it's a client-focused agenda. Now, you may have somebody who's like, well, you wanted the meeting, so what do you want to talk about? That is fine. You can have some bullet points, agenda items, but then you want to ask them, where would you like to start? And that makes it about them, because you're including them in the conversation and asking what's piquing their interest and where they want to start. So make sure you have that customer-focused agenda. You want to ask really great questions. We call them better questions or BTR questions. Background questions are designed to uncover background and problems that you know you can solve. Thought-provoking are getting to magnify those problems so much that they need to do something about it. And then lastly, revelation questions are designed to get them to verbalize what an ideal solution looks like for them. It's all based around principles of communication. People place a higher value on what they say and conclude versus what they're being told.
Absolutely.
And then you have to be a great listener. You can ask all the great questions in the world. You can have the best agenda, but if you're not really listening, you will lose the business. When clients were asked what's the number one sales trait they want from people that they're working with, 80% said somebody that actively listens to them. 80%. You need to be a great listener, not listening to reply, listening to understand, listening out of curiosity. Those are the top traits of the folks that I work with. They're really curious about the people that they work with, and they're not so focused on their agenda that they can't be flexible in a conversation. So listen. In order to show that you're listening, take notes, summarize what you heard. I'm going to give you a power phrase to use. And the power phrase is based on what you just told me. People don't argue with their own data. So if you've gone through and you've said, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. We talked about this, this, and this. Anything I missed, anything we didn't cover, anything I misunderstood, any questions that you have. And if they're like, no, we covered everything, that's exactly right. Then based on what you just told me, here's what I recommend, propose, or suggest. The best influencers, the best convincers, the best persuaders, they ask amazing questions until it comes to the close. And then they don't ask. They propose, suggest, or recommend because they've, one, earned the right to do that, and two, people want to be told what to do, especially if they're seeking guidance from you. I don't want to come and be like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, that's why I'm paying you, for you to give me recommend something at the end. I don't, know enough about this to make my own recommendations, but they want to feel included in the decision making. So if you've done your great job asking the questions, listening, summarizing, then you have now earned the right to make that recommendation. And then follow through is so important. There's a scientist, his name was Herman Ebbinghaus. Back in 1884, he discovered what was called the forgetting curve. And that basically says that after a 10-minute presentation, we forget 50% of the information immediately. And after 2 days, that drops down to 17 to 25%. And you may say, well, Melissa, why do you even have a job if no one's remembering anything that you say? Well, Herman Ebbinghaus also came up with what's called the learning curve, which is with follow through and reinforcement, you can increase that retention up to 100%. Send your notes, send materials, recap the conversation. The next time you meet with them, recap the conversation so that they understand, can clarify any questions or points. So to kind of close it out, words to use and words to lose. I want you to lose the word follow up. Notice we say follow through. Now, when I first started at Lincoln and working with my new boss, he was like, we don't say follow up, we say follow through. And I was like, okay, is there really a difference? And of course, the nerd in me had to look it up, and there is a difference. Following up is a communication-based way. It's usually one-sided, but it does build trust. Following through is an action-based way of building trust. It's I promise to do something and I'm going to follow through until that action is completed. That helps build trust. That builds trust faster than following up and just communication-based ways. And it's usually two-sided. Both people have something to do to kind of move the sale forward. This slide gives you some ways to say the same thing without using those words and sounding like everyone else. And then the other words I want you to lose are just and any. Now, there are times in the English language where you are going to have to use the words just and any. I literally just used it by saying based on what you just told me. But when it comes to I'm just checking in, I'm just wondering if you have any clients, just touching base, you can remove that word and it's still a sentence. And even though the words are tiny and insignificant, they make what you're asking for seem tiny and insignificant. And it sounds like you're apologizing for doing your job. And if you've done your job right and followed all of these tools, then you should never have to apologize for doing it.
Excellent.
So yeah, just to summarize, you'll have better meetings, you'll be more productive, better relationships. And then lastly, we pick one thing. If you try to pick more than one, you will get overwhelmed. Once you've mastered it, pick something else, and then you have to decide, commit, act. I promise you'll succeed. And the hardest part is repeating it all over again. So Jen, with that, I will close it out.
All right.
Turn it back over to you.
Such great information, Melissa. I love your sessions and all of the information that you have to share. And I will say I am a very good student. You know that I have the benefit of knowing this prior to you presenting it today. Yeah. And in one of my emails, instead of saying follow up today, I said follow through.
Love it.
So, all right, let's open it up for questions. And while we are doing that, I'd like to remind everyone that the full library of this recording and all of our other brewcasts are available on E4's website at www.e4.insurance. And let us do our drawing as well. Melissa, if you will do the honors and pick a number between 1 and 18.
I'm going to pick lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7. That winner is Shannon Lean. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Shannon, but Shannon, congratulations. You are our winner. Watch for your inbox for a Starbucks gift card and also a CE voucher coming from all of us to you at from E4 Insurance Services. So congratulations, Shannon. Okay, I am going to pause and take a peek at the chat box here and see if we have any questions. I know that we will be sending out the PowerPoint as well. So rest assured, everyone and people watching the replay, that you will have a copy of the templates and the suggestions that Melissa put together as well. I'm just going to give it a second to see if there's any questions. And I am not seeing any. Melissa, I really want to thank you for spending time with us today. Again, such great content. I know it's so beneficial to all of us, and we really appreciate having you on today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Well, let's tune in next Wednesday, as next week we have E4 Insurance's very own Jeremy Vidmar, Regional Vice President. And Jeremy will be discussing a very important tool that we have available to all of you to help build our business and practices, and very excited to have Jeremy on next week on The Brew. So thank you everyone for joining. We look forward to seeing you again next week on The Brew. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you.